sponsors before. We have another sponsor. It's Hired. So I'm going to welcome Nidhi Gupta, SVP Engineering at Hired. What's interesting about Hired is they supported us already for our event in Paris. So thank you again for supporting us here. And you'll be moderating the next panel.
Thank you. So let me just begin by introducing myself. My name is Nidhi Gupta. I'm the SVP of Engineering at Hired. Hired is a career matching platform that matches outstanding candidates such as yourself with outstanding companies where you work at. We're reinventing hiring. So Hired model is very different from some of the other companies. You, as a candidate, create a profile on the platform, and you wait for jobs to come to you. So jobs apply to you as opposed to you applying to jobs. The reason why I'm excited about being here today, I've had 20 years of experience, management experience under my belt. I was just telling Quen just before this, I wish when I had transitioned into management, there was an organization like Plato. There is no book that's going to guide you as to what job this is. For those of you who raised your hands earlier in terms of you're looking to transition into engineering management, it is a bloody hard job. And the only way you would learn is through the network that you have around you, and thanks to organizations like Plato for making that happen. So thanks so much, Quen.
Yep, thank you, Nidhi. So I'm going to welcome the next panel now, which is about how to identify who to promote to engineering management. So the first speaker for this panel is actually a returning speaker here. So
I think we had a mistake. It's like how to support our engineering management to grow. Actually, the organization like Google, Facebook, like Slack, and those companies invested a lot on how to support our engineering managers. How can we make them grow? And that will be exactly about that topic. Sorry, JB.
Yeah, so the first speaker is still a returning speaker. That hasn't changed, unlike the topic. So please welcome Shivani Sharma from Slack, Senior Engineering Manager at Slack. Your keynote in May at our event had a huge success. It was about transitioning from HESI to EM. And I also know that the calls you've had with our mentees were also a huge success. So thanks a lot for being here. The other mentor that I'm going to welcome here is also a returning speaker, Yi Huang from Senior Engineering Manager at Facebook. So he's one of our most wanted mentor, and I know why. I remember gathering stories from you, and I was impressed by your humility and how much you had taken a step back on your management style, so thank you. Another mentor that we're going to welcome first time here, Vincent Mo from Google. So he's one of our first mentors. Coming yeah, it was in December, I think. That was a long time ago when we were started. So you're a 10-year Googler from Maps to Google Photos and now currently at Google Home. So I think you opened our mentees' eyes on how to deal with underperformance. And when you were telling stories, I remember being impressed by your energy to solve such a tricky situation with your direct reports. So thanks for trusting us along this few months. And last but not least speaker for this panel, Matthew Tippett, Engineering Manager at Amazon. So you're working with the working on the device team, and so you told us about missing out on having mentors during your career, and being a Plato mentor is a way for you to give back to the community. So you have been blogging also a lot about engineering management for a few years now. So we're very glad to have you here.
I hope I get this welcome next time, since this is my first time. So let me actually just start off with a rapid fire question. When an engineer comes to you and says that they want to be an engineering manager, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
So a question which I actually asked to one of the mentees today is, what does engineering management mean to you? And how is it different than technical leadership? So I talk about the term engineering leadership or organizational leadership and technical leadership. Ask them to define it. And usually when they start talking about it and start thinking about it, their eyes begin to open. And so, what ultimately sort of my input to them is, when you're a technical leader, you're helping a technology grow and expand and increase its capability. As an organizational leader, as a manager, you're doing the same thing but for the team. So rather than software architecture, it's a people architecture.
So let me actually just constrain this question a little bit. What's the one sentence that comes to your mind when an engineer comes to you and says they want to be an engineering manager?
I ask them why. What is their motivation? Do they think it's a promotion? Do they actually think that they're going to have a different kind of impact? I have 2 engineers on my team that have recently talked to me about this in the last 6 months in the latest performance review cycle. And I think both of them have good reasons for it. They're naturally gelling the team. They're adding to the culture of the team. They are mentoring people on the team. It's important to know their motivations and for them to understand that it's not a promotion, that it's a lateral, separate track. So why?
I was going to give the same answer, so can I save my sentence for the next question?
Yeah, it's very similar, but mine is a little bit more extreme. So my answer has always been no. You cannot do that. This is not good for you. And then we will be involved in a discussion, kind of argument. And if he can convince me that this is the right thing to do, all right, no, I'll consider about that.
I will add a little bit to it. So the way it was put to me, which was very helpful for me thinking through it, it was someone asked me, do you prefer debugging code or do you prefer debugging people? And I thought about the times when I debugged code. I'll spend all night digging through the code and solving a bug. And at the end, when I fix it, it's like, that was awesome, right? Like, it's so satisfying. But that kind of satisfaction for me didn't last as long as when someone would come to me with a personal problem, like they're having disagreements with a teammate, or there's someone on another team that they're having a lot of trouble with, and we would work it out together. When we would solve that kind of problem, and someone comes to me distressed, and they go away with clarity, like that gave me a whole different level of satisfaction. And so that was the thing that helped me. So that's what I would ask people.
I think you and I are cut from the same cloth, because my first thought when somebody comes to me is, oh my God, what a waste of a brain.
That was what my manager told me when I became manager.
So Vincent, what you described is what I often refer to as discovering your passion, right? Helping somebody discover their passion, because they may just look at, all of us sitting up here and they may think, oh my God, this is such a sexy job. But being an EM is a really crummy job. There are many, many, many aspects of it which is really crummy. So you really have to be convinced that this is the job for you. So let's talk about the transition. So when that transition is happening, how do you support them before, during, so before you've done a discovery process in terms of whether they're truly passionate about this or not, but during and after, so let's talk about during, how do you support them in their first 3 months trying out being an EM?
All right. This is the downside of having the mic. So I think before someone became EM, so the one thing that I let them know is that this is a sacrifice. You are not going to get what you want, right? You are going to the valley. You are going to use the skills that you are not good at to meet the expectation, and you are going to completely discard the skills that you are very good at. So the first few months is going to be miserable, right? And then I'm here to give you emotional support and skill support, but you need to be prepared that it's going to be super, super hard to do. So the first few months, I think my role primarily was the, spiritual leader for them, emotional support, telling them, hey, this is normal. everything is going to be okay. You need to go outside of the valley, and then it will eventually become better. So I think that's the most the thing that many people need in the first few months. Usually depression, right? I want that to. I don't want that to block them.
Do you actually have the conversation with them that this is a completely different job from an engineering from an IC?
Absolutely. I think, so one of the things that we did before someone became manager was that we hold their shoulders and we tell them, no, it's not going to be good for you, right? Your career growth is going to be delayed. If you continue to be IC, you can get to the next level 1 year from now. If you become manager, it's going to be 1 year from now. If you are still smiling like me right now, it's already good luck. So we'll have a lot of conversations to try to not them become manager. But if they can go through this stress, that's a good sign that they can go through the valley as well.
I totally agree with that. And I think that hits on a really important point because so in the first 3 months, for me, I find it really important to show someone that it's like to set their expectation that it's this is a new job, like everyone's been saying before, but to put it in a context. Like, how many of you have been to a 4-year school to learn some skill that you used in your job, whether it's computer science or design or whatever, right? Like, many of us went to school for a certain trade, right? And then we went to work on it. How many of you went to 4-year school to learn management? There's no such thing. Well, okay, maybe some of you have. I have never been to. In fact, I haven't been to like a class. Even one class on management at Google, because when I became manager at Google, there was no such thing. But if you think about code is, in fact, very clear cut. There are very clear rules, and the compiler will even tell you when you're wrong. There's no such thing for people. People are way more complicated than code, and yet there's no such training. And so I think it's very important to tell new managers it's okay, like you're gonna suck at your job, but think about how good a programmer you were in your first 3 months. And I think that mentality that is that it's okay that you're learning is very important, and to set up structures based on that, like peer support, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the hardest part, sorry, I'm gonna switch topics. So the thing, looking back to my career, when I made the transition, thinking about what was the toughest thing for me as an engineer transitioning into an engineering management role, it was unlearning everything, right? You are so used to, you have to achieve, you get to a certain point from a technical skill set standpoint before you transition into a manager role. And I was super used to just walking into a room, draw something on the board, and then say, hey, this is how it should be. But you sort of just have to completely unlearn that and bite your tongue. So that was the toughest part for me when I transitioned, and I made a shitload of mistakes. So my question to you guys is, what was the toughest part for you as you transitioned into engineering management?
Well, when you're an IC, you're talking about tech, you're talking about, as Vincent was saying, objective things. When you're sitting down one-on-one and you're having you're struggling in an area, engineers generally don't talk to each other about that sort of thing. As a manager, when you sort of have to, basically swallow saying, I'm going to deliver bad news. That's probably the hardest first lesson. Being objective and ensuring it's constructive criticism goes a long way to allow you to practice it. And when you're practicing it, and when you have, at different companies, they've got different cultural frameworks that allow you to understand how to look at problems. When you've got that language that helps you communicate about why and how and so on, it makes it a lot easier. But definitely sort of the first sort of 90 days issue of how do I have those hard conversations, probably the scariest thing for a new engineering manager. But it's also something where you can get a lot of practice through what a lot of the companies on the board provide.
For me, it was having difficult conversations. I probably read there's a great book actually called Difficult Conversations that I've utilized, and until you actually have those conversations, as much as you're prepared, humans are not code. Humans are like you will get bugs, and you can make. Okay, so this is my thing. So engineers write code to make a system work efficiently. As a manager, you are trying to get these group of humans to work efficiently, not groups of code to work perfectly. So things are unexpected and things go terribly. And I think it's important to support those new engineering managers that it's okay, you're not going to get those difficult conversations right, but you learn and you reflect and you will do better continually. And even as a senior manager and even directors and VPs that I've talked to, it's just a different set of problems and different set of difficult conversations that you have. So it doesn't get any easier, it's just that the problems are different at each level.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Right, cool. And I was told that not to talk too much. So, right, Kwang? So I totally echo them. So my biggest challenge is kind of, I don't know what I'm doing. It's, I think there's, if I use one thing to describe that, it's like, kind of winking my eyes to a beautiful girl in darkness. Only I know what I'm doing. No one else does. So, I feel like I was busy every day, but where's my value? And I tried to learn from my manager, but it seems like everything I learned did not apply. So, and then later I found out the way to do that, which is I have to learn a lot of management, philosophies or practices after work. I cannot rely on the work. So my growth really depends on what I do after work rather than during the 8 hours. It's been for a couple of years, but I think I've learned like that every day.
So everyone who has engineers working with or for them, we're in this Stack Overflow generation. You have a code problem, you can go to Stack Overflow. One thing which is a recent phenomena is Quora. It's soft skills. Going there and looking at all the different ways that people are approaching things is really valuable from an engineering management perspective. The flip side is all of you there should be posting on Quora. As you go and think about how to do a constructive discussion on in responding to a question, you will think harder yourself. You'll learn, you'll gain insight into yourself.
Great. I'm going to switch to questions from the audience. We hear a lot about non-technical skills being important, but we still see a trend only of highly technical managers. What is the right balance?
So I think of this as, for many of us who started as engineers, we understand levels of abstraction in code, right? When you're using a library, you want there to be a good API, but you don't worry about what's underneath it, right? And for certain parts of code, you need to know certain amounts of the details. And I think that applies with engineering management too. The shift from engineering to engineering management, you have to start thinking about people as APIs, right? Or as libraries. So, for this person, that as different libraries have different uses, people, there's different strengths for different people. And so for one person, you might say, that person, I can give them a huge thing. They'll just go off and code it, and they'll come back when it's done. For this other person, I know this person will move very fast, but they're going to break a lot of stuff. So I have to watch that, right? So I think it's the same for engineering management, that it's not either or. The important thing in engineering management is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the people and of the team as a whole, and then filling in for where the gaps are. So, in photos, the Android team had very different strengths from our iOS team, which had different strengths from the web team. Now on Google Home, totally different, right? And I think as an engineering manager, it's very important to learn the strengths and weaknesses and then identify where you need to poke and prod and where you need to fill in yourself, whether that means writing code or whether that means making a spreadsheet or whatever, right? That's the role of the engineering manager.
Shivani, you just said that this was a human problem, not a coding problem, but Vincent seems to have made it an algorithmic problem.
So I think it depends on the company size and it depends on your team size. So we talked, I think one of the other panels talked about the TLM role, the technical lead manager role. And I see this more on the infrastructure teams at Slack. So the folks that we were really strong ICs and we needed them to really lead a group of engineers of 3 to 4 people to really work through a tangled mess on our infrastructure because we've scaled to a lot of people and a lot of large teams. And so how do we restructure this? How do we re-architect this? But then also you managing those people and getting that management experience as well. So I think this balance is generally for newer managers and also depending on what area of the product you're working on.
All right, next question. What kind of learning and development should we be providing to new engineering managers? We've talked already a lot about one-on-one, guidance about survival. Any other insights you all want to offer?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of management philosophy books out there. Having a lot of those harder, sort of more unusual philosophies visible. They're based on sometimes science, sometimes pseudoscience, but as engineers, we're focusing on the tech and the architectures. Reading, bringing those in, experts in those fields come in would be a very strong way of improving the understanding of the varied world that's engineering management.
The one thing that I will say is what's worked for me really well is shared experiences. So all of us have been there, done it before, and having a very authentic, honest, transparent conversation with the ICs and showing them empathy that we've been there, we've all been through this, and the ship will sail, you will survive, you will come out of the valley, goes a long way in terms of helping.
So for new engineering managers, I would also suggest getting mentors and also leaning on your peer engineering managers in your organization as well. I know that at Slack what we do is after we have aspiring manager training and then when they actually do transition and do the proper management training, that we also provide coaching for them for the first 6 months in their role. So they have someone that's outside the company that they are hooked up with to work through all of the details of what they're dealing with. So it's not just the manager.
Wonderful. I'm getting the "you are dead" signal, so I think we need to leave the stage. Thank you, everybody, for the great chat. Thanks, everybody.